we have ethics and sense of right and wrong as humans, right? There's a lot around that emotional decision making and the trust aspect that is important to the way we make decisions, which is all of these things don't exist in AI.
Hi, welcome to Lumos Talks, powered by Blindspot, the weekly show on growth marketing, straight from the people doing the work on the ground, the forward thinkers and the amazing humans. I'm Seb Weber, I'm the ECD of Blindspot, and today with me is Hannah, who runs our content. Say hi, Hannah.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. I'm Hannah.
A quick bit of context for anyone new. Blindspot is a digital out-of-home network allowing people to connect with 2.5 million screens around the world across 50 countries. You can pick your screen, set your hours, launch a campaign in minutes, no agency needed. Everyone from solo entrepreneurs to big companies, big brands, small brands, and everyone in between. And now our guest. Our guest today is a neuroscientist turned product marketing leader, currently staff PPM at Cohere, leading go-to-market for the Agentic Enterprise platform. Yael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, thank you. So our get down here is real simple. We just like to know how you got to where you are now. I mean, super interested. You started in neuroscience and ended up in leading product marketing. Could you walk us through that journey a little bit?
Absolutely. So I started out my academic journey in studying neuroscience, always been really interested in consumer behavior and really what drives our decision making as humans. And so worked in a lab for a couple of years where I really understood how the brain works. And, fast forward, a few years after that, I spent, the past decade and more actually building and marketing AI platforms for enterprise customers. And looking back on it, I'm realizing so much of the parallels in what we really understand about human intelligence and being able to try to replicate and build as much of that in artificial intelligence. And being, there are still many differences in the ways in which the two fields are operating today, and I'd love to see more of that convergence. But it is exciting to see to start to see these fields converging. And initially spent a few years as a product manager building these AI systems for enterprise customers, but spent most of my career as a product marketer, really more on the go-to-market side, really figuring out how to position products effectively and in a differentiated way, which matters more than ever today. And being able to understand buyer psychology, really going back to those roots, to understand how to message to them in an effective way, how we can cut through the noise, really influence their behavior and drive business results as a continuation of that.
That's amazing. And I think it's also amazing you've been working in AI for 10
With
years.
AI for 10 years, exactly.
Which is a feels like a lifetime in something. It feels like we obviously work with AI a lot, but we're still probably we are probably still only 3 years deep in. That's a pretty crazy starting point. How did you enter into the AI field? Like, what was the decision? Was it because you like patterns and behaviors and this? What actually? Here's a better question. What was it like in the early days of
10 years, 10
years ago?
Yeah.
Because
How did you know?
I'm just curious about how you were even. What models were you like? What does that even look like 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot has changed, and I think looking back on obviously hindsight is 2020, and now it sounds like the perfect journey. But I really fell into AI after a couple of years in consulting, where I started my career. I felt that there was a lot around the role that could be up leveled in terms of the way that we were delivering value for clients, that just the way I was doing my job, doing research, being able to collate themes into insights. And so I started out at a company called Quid, which basically aggregated unstructured data and lots of articles, company data sets, patents, the likes, to really identify themes and help businesses grow and differentiate themselves. So, by wanting to improve and potentially automate some of the way that I was doing my consulting work, I fell into AI and realized the power of the technology. But at the time, and again, AI has been around since the 60s in
Right.
different formats. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
what I will say is really been the step function change in the last 3 years is two things. Like one is the natural language processing aspect and the ability for non-technical users, and I would
Right.
consider myself one of those people, to be able to actually build and use AI, right? You needed it previously had to be an AI machine learning engineer to be able to use this technology, but the chat aspect, um, we we now have democratized that, right? To so that all of us can build and use
Right.
it. That's really the big change that happened when the transformer model and that paper was written in 2017 by Google, which ironically, my co-founder and CEO Aidan Gomez at Cohere was one of those co-authors on that paper, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one of the big changes, and then through that, the other big shift is we have so much more data and ability to process that through compute in today's
Mm.
world. And so we're able to solve problems, right, that we weren't able to before. And so now as an enterprise, customers have 90% of unstructured data, which is text and videos and images. And so we're creating more of that data, but now we have the ability to actually analyze it at scale.
Cool.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
I mean, I did see somewhere that you said AI needs to be safe, ethical, trustworthy as well, which we don't know if it is or not, but it has to be, right? So where does that conviction usually come from? Is that like the scientist in you, or is that like just a natural instinct?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we're all seeing how powerful and incredible this technology can be. But when you democratize something like this without the proper governance and controls, and just putting enterprise aside, which obviously has more strict kind of regulations and need to control and have that visibility, even on the consumer space, I think there's a lot of risk in today's world. And if we don't really understand what these agents are doing autonomously on our behalf and what tools it has access to. And so I think just when you democratize something so powerful, and you see the impact that algorithms can have in shaping behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? Social media and the things that we're just maybe an echo chamber is being exposed to, as opposed to actually broadening our
Mm.
understanding of. I think that can be dangerous without us even realizing it. And then I think the other layer is going back to the kind of the human intelligence aspect, where we have ethics and sense of right and wrong as humans, right? There's a lot around that emotional decision making and the trust aspect that is
Yeah.
important to the way we make decisions, which is all of these things don't exist in AI. Um,
Yeah.
and so again, looking to neuroscience to build safely, I think is definitely the path forward. Um, so that
Mm-hmm.
we can try to mimic the unique qualities of how we as humans are maybe more naturally geared
Yeah.
toward being
I,
safe.
I have a thought on that because I do a few things, and one of the things I do is I have a full AI studio here in Los Angeles. It just means we make content using AI, but we've been doing it for the last 2.5, 3 years. We do advanced workflows, data set capture, like we archive existing actors and actresses for future use, and when we started, the angle was always about it's just the tool, right? And we wanted to be very human at the center, right? And it was all about uh, I make a bunch of commercials, a bunch of music videos, doing our first feature film. Um, but our pitch was always about there being a human in the middle. But what's happened over the last 6 months is it's got better. Not we rely way more on writing. We'll have a
Mhm.
writer work on a pass, but now the tidying up is better done in AI. Even the creative intelligence has, and look, we use anytime you see a finished shot, there is probably 3 or 4 tools being used, okay, to really get that shot, that one shot from motion or photorealism, whatever it is. What scares me a bit is, yeah, that was it. The pitch was that there was always this human at the center, and I'm actually seeing us now. I'm seeing the create things I didn't think was going to happen yet, like the creative that now it comes up. If I train a model on 20 years of video treatments, or it's really good. It's kind of better, if I'm being really honest, and it doesn't cost me anything. It's quicker to make revisions, and it's getting passed by the clients. And so I can see how there's gonna definitely be an ethical turning point. I also just don't know whether we're past it or not, because also 6 months ago, and I'm just going on a ramble because I think it's important. 6 months ago, everything I would post, all the comments would be like AI slop, AI slop, AI slop, AI slop. It's That's toning down, but more importantly, the studios. What's really interesting from a data perspective is a year ago, I'd work with Netflix or whoever, and I'd go and be signed on for a project. And then their business affairs team would send me a list this long of platforms that I wasn't allowed to use because they were Chinese owned or whatever. There was a bunch of reasons where I had to um, keep the models offline keep the data offline. Now I'm working with companies like Mattel or serious companies, and they aren't worried about an indemnity list anymore. It's definitely becoming like what was scary a year ago is now they're all folding and they just realize the benefits of this. And they're actually being less. I mean, like, think about the Barbie thing for a minute. I'm working with unreleased Mattel Barbie IP that I have to train a model on, and they're not giving me an indemnity list. It's kind of nuts that how quickly everyone's folded in a year and been like, okay, this is just the way things are now.
It is really interesting to see how that, because behavior takes a long time to change.
Yeah.
And I think I will say for the enterprise, there's still, there's this enormous gap between testing something and, a lot of company budgets have soared in terms of what they're spending on AI. And they're
Mhm.
blowing through those budgets because of the way that usage-based pricing works. But um, even though you see this increase in wanting to test a bunch of these different LLMs and tools, there's this huge gap between POC and production. So,
Yeah.
95% of pilots don't ever make it really into a full-fledged, agentic enterprise. That's the goal, but in order to get there, CISOs, CIOs are becoming the key stakeholders and need to be involved, and that's where the governance and control aspect comes into play. So, definitely seeing those headwinds on the enterprise side. But again, I don't see them as headwinds. I think it's important to build with those things from the beginning, and not just build, but market, right? Like really partnering with customers and building that trust and not selling to them, but educating them on the technology and really trying to tell a story, being thought leaders. Like a lot of the way we go to market has changed as a result of that, and
Mm,
needing to establish that trust again to bring that forward.
it's amazing.
I see that you built the PMM functions from scratch, right? And you saw the jump rates to like 40%. So when you walk into a company with no product marketing, how and where do you start?
Yeah, the signs are usually, if there isn't a product marketing team, the signs are usually visible through messaging being inconsistent, both internally and on behalf of customers, really not understanding kind of who you are and what your product platform does. Yeah, quite simply. And married to that is, your differentiated position in the market, right? Who is your audience, and how are you uniquely different? Um, how does your platform solve their unique needs? So a lot of that is a symptom of not having a go-to-market strategy that really thinks about your audience, how your platform is different, and then how you want to tailor that messaging to your audience, which is a huge part of product marketing. If it's an enterprise business, there will also be kind of sales enablement gaps in terms of feeling equipped to be able to not just push the product, but everything around selling it effectively. And I think a lot of people think of product marketing as just an output of what gets launched, but if it's done really well and strategically, I think it's an influence and input to the product strategy too, in terms of how to build something in a differentiated way by understanding the market and the competitive landscape really well. So those are, some symptoms around what it looks like without product marketing, and your win rates will either be flat to down. Your adoption might be flat because you haven't really done a good job announcing and promoting things in the right regulated regimented way, to have that constant cadence with customers, um, and um, and pipeline uh, might not be driven by the things the audience that you're actually wanting to bring in, right? You might be bringing in leads, but they're not the right
Mm.
one, and that goes back to the good market strategy. So I think it's around identifying which of those issues exist, if not all of them, and there's many more, of course. But I think product marketing is one of those roles that is becoming more and more important in today's world to really differentiate from all the other tools and let alone AI tools out there, and that can flex depending on where the business really needs it the most, whether it's pre-sales, post-sales,
Mm.
product, etc. We report to, I've reported into marketing, into sales, into product, and so it's one of those really versatile roles that's um, very cross-functional and hard to get right, but very important to the business.
Yeah, we deal with something
But
similar at Blind Spot quite frequently, where a lot of what we have to do is we're educating SMBs on the what the real pricing is of digital out of home, because if you're a mom and pop shop or you're a small startup, you just assume that out of home advertising is out of your budget, right? Because you primarily see Amazon Prime, Netflix, you see all these $1 million budget campaigns. And so a big thing that we have to do is educate um, small businesses on what programmatic is, that you can actually only have to pay for the time that's used, and that actually the barrier to entry is considerably lower than what you might think it is. It also traditionally was a very complex process booking out of home. You would have to call a buyer, you'd have to call the landlords, and a lot of people have given up in that process because they've tried to do it. And so my point in all this is it's we have that problem. We still have our own version of that problem, which is like, yeah, sure, we want enterprise clients. Don't get me wrong, we want the big dogs to come in, but when we deal with people like that, they already know media buying. They already know they have a budget. We don't have to explain how to stretch a budget out. They usually come in with some very clear specifics of expectation. Um, but we want all the small business, we want the people to be introduced to using this world, and we have to do a lot of education to like what that actually means. And so you can imagine we're not talking necessarily to marketing people, right? We're talking to three people companies about how to spend their money and the best ROI, and how demographic spread, timings, and a lot of it gets lost because we have on one set we have amazing clientele who just get it, but those are the big fish. But we also understand that the end goal is to get the smaller people to use the platform, but we're also just having to educate them on how this industry works. So
yeah,
it's just really
yeah,
interesting, and it's like, but the opportunity is so great in either one that we have to still focus on both. So it's
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
knowing your
tricky. I think it's
yeah.
helpful to kind of think about the paths of the purchase process and which stakeholders get involved at various points. And yeah, you need a cohesive brand narrative, but then you want targeted messaging for each of your audiences,
Right.
across their purchase journey. And so it's like it's finding that kind of balance between the two.
Yeah. Um, what are the most common mistakes you see with AI companies when it comes to their go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I think that, with with the speed at which products are being developed today, it can be hard to keep up and really figure out the cadence and kind of the balance of messaging and reaching out to customers and prospects about it without overwhelming them. I mean, you see all of our playbooks are being thrown out the window, frankly, and we're having to
Yeah.
really rethink the way that we launch products, the way we do pricing, the way we do AEO versus SEO, the way that we have to condense our sales process and really understand the buyer across that journey. And so I think so much of it is changing, and the important thing is to understand which channels really your users are on the most, and
Mm,
really picking those kind of bets, um, meeting them where they're at, and and ensuring that your business is making a mark when there's all this kind of noise in the market, and standing out in a differentiated way. Because if you're if you're simply using LLMs in a way that any other competitor can be using it, by just doing kind of primary research on uh, or
yeah.
more so just doing generic research on what
Hmm.
market trends and competitors are doing. And if you don't have that kind of core brand messaging or ICP that you're trying to go after, there isn't going to be anything differentiated
Totally.
about your
Hmm.
company. And so, really going back to the basics of brand and what makes you unique is more important than ever.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Agreed.
And I like what you said about like we're having to rethink how we work with this, because what I've seen is um if you just that sure everyone's just wanting to figure out how to slot in AI into their current work, and that necessarily isn't the best way of doing things. When it comes to just my experience in production, I've had to rethink the entire production process. And there hasn't been a playbook. It's not just like I've slotted in AI and like now it's easier. We've had to rebuild how we build this stuff from the ground up. And I imagine that's got to be the same for any companies that are using AI successfully. It's not really just about like adding AI in. It's really about like, okay, AI is my baseline now. How do I re-engineer the entire company around this core strength now? And I think from what I've seen, the people that aren't doing good are just, like you said, people that are just using LMMs as a surface level tool. Great. Now you can Google 3 times quicker. Like, what is that really going to do for you? So yeah, I think it's really about if you're an entrepreneur now or in marketing, you've got to really re-engineer how what you do around AI rather than just like slot it in, because
Yeah.
it changes a lot of things. And it's really good at some stuff and it's maybe not so good at some other stuff, but also just the pace at which the tech is changing. You can't really make any concrete decisions that are going to last too long based on capability because you don't know where it's going to be in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months time. So it's a really interesting place to be. Um, yeah,
It is.
fascinating. Fascinating. All right, we're at rapid fire takeaways now. So this is super simple. It's the end of the show. Short answers, no overthinking. First thing that comes to mind, one channel you would double down on today.
In-person events.
Mm.
Great. Okay. Well, one metric that actually matters.
Hard to pick one. I think adoption is a very key indicator of retention.
Mm.
And, I wouldn't focus as much on, yeah, I think pre-funnel is still important, but because companies are trying a bunch of different tools, I'm more concerned about who's really going to stick around and the retention of it. And so looking at the post sales metrics around adoption, which leads to retention for me are really interesting.
I just side note, I love
That
that
is
you
so
said that.
great.
I love that
I
because it's
love
just
that
on
too.
on theme of like retention. Like, I thank you for saying that. You're the first
Mhm,
person that said that, and we've always thought it
mhm.
every episode. So
Oh,
big
good,
shout out.
Wow,
One
that
grow
is great.
one growth myth you strongly disagree with.
I think people can use AI as a way to just amplify things across all channels, but not if you're not thinking about like the right channels for your audience, it's not going to cut through, and it's going to be overwhelming to them. So the kind of the myth around just blasting and needing to feel like the message has to be everywhere without really speaking to the
Mm,
user and targeting them.
great.
Perfect. Okay, last one. One piece of advice for marketers listening.
Really double down on brand and what makes you different, thinking about how you can emphasize those aspects across everything that you're doing. Everyone's really going back to the companies that they trust the most in this world of AI where we don't know which platforms and technologies that we can trust. And so really going back to the human aspect of what emotionally connects people to your company and what makes you different, because it should shine through in your campaigns,
Mm,
in the way that you build relationships with customers, the way that you launch products and say you'll deliver on what you promise. I think that that trust and the brand that comes through with that is more important than ever in today's AI driven world.
yeah, I love that. And your
Mhm.
storytelling really has to be a key
100%.
True.
focus point. Hey, thank you for coming in today. We really appreciate it. You're awesome. And
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
Thanks so
thank you.
much for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.